the people or the parties, they get into an agreement on the performance or the non-performance acts. If it happens or if it does not happen, then it is called a contingent contract, which may happen within that stipulated time period or specific time period. So this particular event, it may occur, it may take place or it may not. Hi and welcome to all dear students. I, George Lime, Commerce Faculty, Department of Commerce, Vidhyaashram First Grade College, MYSURU, the Temple of Excellence. Dear students, today we shall take up the session 1 for Unit 3 of your business laws. Unit 3 is of Contingent Contracts. So this is the unit name or the chapter name, that is Unit 3 or Chapter 3, we call it as Contingent Contracts. Now let us understand the meaning of contingent contract or the concept of contingent contract, and we shall go into little bit of depth where we can understand other topics which I am going to cover in this particular sessions. Okay. So students, he said, what do you mean by a contingent contract? See, first of all, it says contracts are of different types. We have different types of contracts. Okay. Since people get into like various kinds of agreements, so we can see lot of people or different people or different kinds of people, they will be entering into different kinds of agreements, that is on the performance as well as on the non-performance of certain acts. So here the people or the parties, they get into an agreement on the performance or the non-performance acts, and we can understand these contracts by dividing them into two types. One is absolute contracts and second is contingent contract. Now let us understand what is an absolute contract and what is a contingent contract. An absolute contract is a contract where it says the promisor performs the promise, that is a party to the contract A, for example, he will be performing the contract without any condition. So here under this particular contract, that is absolute contract, the promisor, one who is going to promise or one who is giving offer, so that particular person, he will be making this agreement or a contract without any kind of, that is without any condition, without any condition. So there is no condition on the point of view of, that is the promisor. So here contingent contracts on the other hand, if you see, what is a contingent contract? A contingent contract, it says it is one where the promisor will perform the contract, right? That is his obligation only when certain conditions, that is, are met. So only when certain conditions are met, here he is going to make a contract. So only on the happening of that particular event, he is going to make a contract. So that is known as a contingent contract. I'll repeat the absolute contract and contingent contract. An absolute contract is a contract where the promisor, he will be performing the contracts without any condition. Secondly, a contingent contract is a contract where the promisor, he will be doing his contract only on his fulfillment of his obligation, right? That is only when his conditions are being fulfilled. Students, it says we can see contract of insurance, indemnity or contract of guarantee, they have one thing in common. So all these three contracts, that is contract of indemnity, contract of guarantee and contract of insurance, all these three, they have one common thing in their contract, that is they create an obligation. They create an obligation on whom? On the part of promisor. That is, if an event which is collateral to the contract does or does not happen. So the common thing in all these three contracts, that is contract of insurance, contract of indemnity and contract of guarantee, it says there is an obligation on part of the promisor that they are going to do the contract on the happening or not happening of that particular event. So it says which is collateral to the contract where it does or does not happen. So only if it happens or if not, if it doesn't happen also, they are going to come into a contract. Now example, if you take a life insurance contract, here what happens, there are two parties. One is the insurer and the insured. Insurer is a person or it is a company, insurance company, An insured is a person one who takes the policy from that particular company. That is A and B. So A will be the insurance company and B will be the insured one who takes the policy, insurance policy, right? So here the insurer pays a certain amount. So here the insurer, that is A, or the insurance company, is going to pay a certain amount to B, that is to the policy holder, right? That is, insured dies under certain conditions. If that particular person B, if this person B, if he dies under certain condition, then A is going to compensate or indemnify for the loss, right, on the happening of that particular event. The insurer is not called into action until the event of the death is the insured happens. So here the insurance company will not come and pay to B until unless B dies. Until unless B dies, the insurance company or the insurer will not come and do that particular act. Understood? So this is a contingent contract. So here under contingent contract, as I told in the definition, we can see there the one where the promisor performs his obligation only when the conditions are fulfilled. So only here, if the particular person B, that is the insured, if he dies only on that particular happening of that particular event, the insurer is going to pay. So this is an example of contingent contract. Now section 31 of Indian Contract Act of 1982, it defines the contingent contract as, it says, if two or more parties enter into a contract. So if two or more parties, if they enter into a contract to do or not to do something. Why they enter into contract? Because in order to do something or not to do something, and if an event which is collateral to it, and if any event which is collateral, that is to that particular contract, does or does not happen, if it happens or if it does not happen, then it is called a contingent contract. Then it's called a contingent contract. I'll repeat. According to section 31 of Indian Contract Act of 1872, it says contingent contracts where if two or more parties, if they enter into a contract and thereby to do something or not to do something, right? If an event, that is, if any event occurs which is collateral to the contract and thereby the contract does or does not happen, then we call it as a contingent contract. Now example here, Peter is a person, he is a private insurer. So he is a private insurer and he enters into a contract with John. This is, so we call Peter as A and John as B. Okay. So A and B. Peter will be the A and John is B. So Peter is a private insurer. He enters into contract with John, that is insured, we say, for fire insurance of John's house. So B, John, is taking a fire insurance on his house from A, that is the insurer or the company, we say. Now according to the terms and agreements between these both, that is Peter and John, that is insurer and insured, Peter agrees to pay John an amount, that is of rupees 5 lakhs. Now why he is paying this 5 lakhs, why he is agreeing, why he is making contract and saying that I am going to pay 5 lakhs rupees for his house if the house is burnt against the annual premium of rupees 5,000. So every year the annual premium, that is once in a year, the totally 5,000 has to be paid by whom? That is by John. So on the happening of that event, if the John's house, if it is been lost by fire or if it is burned by fire, then Peter will be paying John rupees, how much? 5 lakh rupees for the consideration called as a premium of rupees 5 lakhs which is being paid annually. So this is a contingent contract. So why we call this a contingent contract? Because on the happening of an event only, it is going to be getting into a contract. That means on the happening of the event, you are going to fulfill the condition and you are going to compensate the loss. So here the burning of the house is neither a performance promise as part of the contract nor a consideration, but Peter's liability arises only when the collateral event occurs. Here Peter's obligation or his liability will come into force only when John's house is being burnt in fire. Until unless there will be no any kind of contract, that is there will not be any kind of liability on part of the insurer, that is Peter, to pay him until unless something happens to his house, that is, if the house is been burned by fire. Now students, as we understood the concept of the contingent contract, in that I told you what is absolute contract and contingent contract. Now let us understand what are the essentials of this contingent contract. Now, first essential is it depends on the happening or the non-happening of a certain event. As I told you, contingent contract happens only at the time of it may be happening or on the non-happening. That is, something happens or which does not happen. So of that particular event. So this particular contract of contingent, it says only on the happening or on the non-happening of a certain event. So this contract is a contingent only when something happens or something does not happen of that particular certain event. Now these particular events can be preceded or it can be subsequent, and this will not matter. So this particular event, it may occur, it may take place or it may not. So as I told you in the example, Peter promises to pay John rupees, how much? 5,000 rupees if Rajdhani Express reaches Delhi on time. So here you can see the very best example given for this particular essential, first essential, that is depends upon happening on the non-happening of an event. So he says Peter is promising to John that he is going to pay 5,000 rupees when only on the happening of that event. What is that happening of the event? That if that particular Rajdhani Express train, if it reaches Delhi on time, then he is going to pay the 5,000 rupees to John. So this is a contingent contract because it says there is an obligation been put on part of the promisor that only if it fulfills that particular condition, I am going to pay the amount. Now second is the event is collateral to the contract. It means that event is not a part of the contract. You have to see that any event which is not the part of the contract, it cannot be performed promise or consideration for a promise. So it is very important that the event is not a part of that particular contract. Whatever the event may be, it is not part of the particular contract. Here main importance is whether it is going to happen or not. Whether something is going to do or we are not going to do it. That's what it is. So Peter enters into a contract with John and he promises to deliver 5 television sets to him. Okay. So Peter is entering into contract with John and he is promising that he is going to deliver how many sets of television? 5 sets of television. Now John promises to pay him rupees 75,000 for this 5 sets of television. Okay. On happening, that is on the happening of the delivery or happening of the event. This is not a contingent contract because it says since John obligation depends on the event which is part of the contract. Here this is not a contingent contract. Why it is not a contingent contract? Because John's obligation is what? John's obligation is it depends upon the event that which is part of the contract. Now he is promising, Peter is promising that he is going to deliver the 75 sets of television, means that is it is on part of the contract, it is a part of the contract. That is why it is not a contingent contract. So delivery of TV sets is a part of the contract and not a collateral contract. It is not a collateral contract because it is a part of the contract where he is promising that he is going to deliver him 75 sets of color television or television sets. That is why it says this event is collateral to the contract. Third one is the event should not be mere with the will of the promisor. It means we can see an example first, we'll see, then we'll understand the concept. So here Peter promises to pay John rupees 5,000 if Argentina team wins the FIFA World Cup. So if Argentina wins the FIFA World Cup, provided he wants to, then this is not a contingent contract. Actually this is not at all a contract. Why it is not at all a contract? Because here he says this event cannot be wish of the promisor. So it cannot be the wish of the promisor. The contingent contract cannot be a wish of the promisor. It is what? Something has to be done or something has to happen. So you have to do or you should not do. That's what it says. On the happening of some event or on the happening of non-happening of that particular event is called as a contingent contract. So here just by a mere will of the promisor, you cannot call it as a contract. So Peter promises to pay John rupees 50,000 if he leaves Mumbai for Dubai on August 38, 2018. But this is a contingent contract because going to Dubai can be within John's will, but it is not merely his will. So if John is willing to go on that particular date, then it becomes a contingent contract because Peter is promising to pay John rupees 50,000 if he leaves Mumbai on this particular date, that is August 30th, and reaches Mumbai. Then it can be called as a contingent contract because going to Mumbai, it is the will and wish of the other person called as John. So it is left to the option of that particular person, but it is not merely his will. Actually, the will is of the Peter. Peter wants John to go to Dubai. The next is essential is the event should be uncertain. What is certain and what is uncertain? Certain means death. Everyone knows that we are going to die. But when we are going to die, we don't know. That is uncertain. Everyone knows there is going to be a rain in the rainy season. But when it is going to happen, when that particular rain is going to come, it is uncertain. We don't know. Right? So in the same case, if the event is sure to happen, if the that particular event is sure to happen, then the contract is due to be performed. So if you know that this particular person is going to die today, he is in a case of emergency in ICU and is at the verge of going to be dying, then you can make a will. Now that can become a contract. That can become a contract. The will means where that particular person is transferring his assets, right, on somebody else, or he is donating it to some charity houses or something like that. So there it is on the happening of that event, means that person surely is going to die, right? So when that particular event is sure to happen, then the contract is due to be performed. This is not a contingent contract because the event should be uncertain. This is not a contingent contract because we know that it is going to happen. That is why it says it is not a contingent contract and the event should be an uncertain. So uncertain means we don't know. Peter promises to pay, this is an example, of rupees 500 if it rains in Mumbai in this month July 2018. Okay, but this is not a contingent contract because in July rains are almost certainty in Mumbai. So here this is not a contingent contract because everyone knows from month of May up to November it is a rainy season and surely there is going to rain and that particular event is going to happen. So that is why it is not a contingent contract, and that is why it says any event, if it has to be called as a contingent contract, then it should be uncertain, means it may be or may not be. So now coming to the enforcement of contingent contracts. Now we have seen all the 4 important essentials of a contingent contract, students. Now we shall go to the next topic called as enforcement of a contingent contracts. Now under section 32 and 36 of Indian Contract Act of 1872, there are certain rules for enforcement of this particular contracts, that is contingent contracts. Let us see one by one. The first rule says contracts contingent on the happening of an event. It means a contingent contract might be based on the happening of an uncertain future event. On the happening of an uncertain event, then you can call it as a contingent contract. In such cases, what happens? The promisor is liable to do or not to do. In such cases, on the happening of an uncertain event, the promisor is liable to do or not to do something if the event happens. So this is the first rule where it says contract contingent on the happening of an event. So I'll repeat. It says a contingent contract might be based upon. How a contingent contract is based upon? It is totally based upon on the happening of an uncertain event or uncertain future event which may occur in future. In this particular case, the promisor is liable to do or not to do something if the event happens. So however, the contract cannot be enforced by law. Why it cannot be enforced by law? Because it says unless the event takes place, you cannot enforce this particular contract in terms of law. So if the happening of the event becomes impossible, then the contingent contract is void. So in the case, if this particular event, if it is not going to happen, when it is impossible, that particular event becomes impossible, then this contingent contract will be void contract. This particular rule is specified in section 32 of Indian Contract of 1872. Now here we can see the example. Peter promises to pay rupees 50,000. Peter is promising whom? John, rupees 50,000 if he can marry Julia, that is the prettiest girl in the neighborhood, right? Now this is a contingent contract. So it is an obligation. It says if you are going to marry that particular girl called as Julia, then I will be paying you rupees 50,000, that is to John. Now unfortunately what happens, that girl Julia, she died in the car accident. She met with a car accident and she expired. Now since the happening of an event is no longer possible, the contract is void, because whatever the obligation, the condition he had put, the Peter had put on John, so that particular agreement or that particular condition was not able to be fulfilled. So that condition was not able to be fulfilled and that obligation could not be fulfilled. In that case, there is no longer the contract is valid one. It is a void contract. Under rule 2, it says contract contingents on an event not happening. First one is, we see contract contingents on the happening of an event. Here the contract contingent on the event not happening, which is not going to happen. So a contingent contract might be based on here on the non-happening of an uncertain future event. That means sometimes contract may, where it says where the rain may not come. When you are putting a condition that I am going to pay you so and so much of amount on the happening of the event, but if it doesn't happen, what happens here? In such cases, the promise is liable to do or not to do something if the event does not happen. So here under this particular case, the promisor is liable to do something or not to do something under this particular case if the event does not take place or does not happen. But however, the contract cannot be enforced by law. Here also, this particular contract cannot be enforced by law because it says unless happening of the event becomes impossible. Until unless this particular event or the whatever the contract is happening of the event becomes impossible. Now if the event takes place, in case if the event takes place, then the contingent contract is void. So here Peter promises to pay John rupees 50,000 if the ship is named Titanic, which leaves on a dangerous mission, does not return. So if the Titanic ship, if it does not return back, which is going on a dangerous voyage on the sea or on an ocean, if it does not return back, then Peter promises to pay John rupees 50,000. Now this is a contingent contract. Why? Because this contract is enforceable law, where if the ship is sinking or it sinks, making its return impossible. On the other hand, if the ship returns, then the contract is void. So if the ship, Titanic ship, according to Peter, if it does not return, it is a contingent contract. But if the ship returns safely back to the harbor, then this is not the contract, a contingent contract. It says it is, this contract only is a void contract. Rule 3, contingent contracts on the contract of living person who does something or does not or to the event or contract is impossible happening. So under this particular contract of 1872, it says contract is a contingent upon how a person will act, at the future time. Now if I am making some contract, how I am going to act in future, right? Then the event is considered impossible. That particular event is considered as impossible when the person does anything which will make him or make it impossible to event to happen. So I'll give an example, you will understand better. It says Peter is promising to pay John, the same persons we are taking as examples. How much is promising to pay? 5,000 rupees. And he says if he marries Julia. So the same case. Now Julia marries Oliver. Now Peter is promising John, if he marries Julia, he will be paying 5,000 rupees. But in this case, Julia is not marrying John. She is marrying another person called Oliver. Okay. Now this Julia's act thus renders the event of John marrying her is impossible. Now because of Julia is marrying another person, Oliver, now he is not able to fulfill the condition of Peter. John is not able to fulfill the condition or obligation which is being given by Peter. So in such case, it says a divorce is still possible, though, but of the happening of the event is considered impossible. So even though if a divorce has been given and if he marries, it can be, that particular event can happen. But under this case, it is not going to happen. The next rule is contingent contracts on an event happening within specified time. This is very important. So the contracts of contingents where the events are happening on the specified time or a particular time. Now there can be a contingent contract wherein the parties, they promise to do something, right, or not to do something if in certain unfuture, that is, if a future uncertain event happens within that specified period time or a fixed time. Now such a contract is void if the event does not happen at the time lapses. So here what it says, there can be a contingent contract where the party promises to pay or the party promises to do something or not to do something, right, for an uncertain event and which may happen within that stipulated time period or specific time period. Then it says if that particular event does not happen within that stipulated time period or it lapses, then it cannot be called as a contingent contract. So it is also void if the time is fixed. Before the time is fixed, the happening of the event becomes impossible. So here if the event becomes impossible, that is, if the time is fixed and before that particular time period, if it does not happen, if you could not make it, if it is not possible, then it becomes a void contract. So this rule is specified under section 35 of Indian Contract Act of 1872. So here you can see the example for this particular rule. Peter promising John to pay rupees 5,000 if the ship named Titanic, which leaves on a dangerous voyage, right, or mission, returns before June 2001. But this contract is enforceable law if the ship returns within that specified time period. On the other hand, if you see, if the ship is sinking or gets sinked into the sea, then this contract is void. So easily I'll make you understand this particular rule. That is rule 4. It says on the event happening within the specified time period. So here Peter is saying that he is promising Peter is promising John that he is going to pay rupees 5,000. So once again I'll repeat, Peter is promising to John, the other party, rupees 5,000, and where he is making an obligation, a condition is been put on John that if that particular ship called Titanic, if it returns back before June 1st. So here this contract will be enforceable by law only if that particular ship, that is Titanic ship, comes back before that stipulated time period, June 1st. If it does not return, if the ship does not return and if it sinks into the sea or the ocean, then this particular contract is a void contract. So this is about the rule 4. Now rule 5. Now contingent contracts on the event not happening within a specified time. Again I'll give an example. Peter is promising John rupees 5,000 if the ship named Titanic, which leaves on a dangerous voyage, does not return before June 1st. Now this contract is enforceable by law if the ship does not return within the specified time. Also if the ship sinks or burns, the contract is enforced by law since the return is not possible. So under this particular contract, here contingent contracts on the event not happening within the specified time, whereas rule 4, contingent contracts or contract contingent on the event happening within the specified time. See the difference. It is within the specified time, and the rule 5 says on the happening of the event within the specified time. So here, this particular contingent contracts, it is based upon the non-happening of a certain future event. So this is totally based on the non-happening of an uncertain future event within the specified time period or time. Now in this case, what happens? The promiser, that is Peter, I said, so we can take them as a promiser, is liable to do or not to do something if the event does not happen within the set time. So here Peter, is liable to do, or he may not liable to be doing it if the event does not happen within the set time or within that specified time. Now this contract can be enforced by law only if that time period has expired and the event has not happened. So in the event, if that particular event has not happened and if the time period also is expired, then it can be enforced by law and is not happened before the expiry of the time. So before the expiry of time, nothing has happened to that particular ship, right? And only if it has happened after that specified time period, then it says it is a valid contract. Also, if it becomes certain that event will not happen before the time has expired, then it can be enforced by law. Also, it says that this particular contract becomes certain that the event will not happen before the time. So before that given time or set time, if an event is not going to happen, or where the time has been expired, and then it can be enforceable by law. So here again I'll repeat the example for this particular rule. Peter is promising John rupees 5,000. Why? Because he says, if that particular ship called Titanic, which lives on a dangerous mission or a voyage on a sea or a ocean, does not return before June 1st. If that particular Titanic ship, if it does not return by June 1st, then he is going to pay rupees 5,000. Now this contract is enforceable by law. Why? Because if the ship does not return within the specified or fixed time or set date, then you can enforce it by law. Also, on the other hand, it says if the ship sinks or it is burnt on the mission or on a voyage or a mission, then the contract is enforced by law, because the return is not possible. So here, because it has been sink or it has been burnt, in that case it says the contract is enforced by law because the return of the ship is not possible under this case, right? Now rule 6. Contingent contracts are contract contingent on an impossible event. So when an event is impossible, what is the rule applicable? If the contingent contract is based on the happening or the non-happening of an impossible event, then such contract is void. So if a contingent contract is totally based on the happening of happening or non-happening of that particular event, which is impossible event, then that particular contract is called as a void. This is in regardless to the fact that the parties who are there for this particular contract are aware of impossibility of this particular or not. So they are very much aware. The parties to the contract, they are totally and very much aware of the impossibility, means which is not going to be happening, right, or not. So this, it can be explained in example. By giving example, I say that Peter is promising John rupees 50,000 again, but the condition is different here. If sun rises in the west, sun will rise in the west the next morning. So if sun rises in the west, always where it rises, you know that. So if the sun rises in the west, then in the next morning, that is tomorrow, then he is going to pay rupees 50,000. This contract is void since the happening of the event is impossible. So always the sun will rise in the east. It will not happen because everyone knows that this particular example which I gave you, where the sun will be always rising in the east, and whether it will not change for tomorrow or after tomorrow, after 1 year or 10 years. It will be the same until the world is there. So this particular contract becomes impossible, because here is saying that what is going to happen, that is which is impossible event that will not take place. Okay students, so I explained to you all these important topics under this particular session. So I explained to you about the important topic name, that is we call it as the contingent contracts. I explained to you the concept of contingent contract, then explained to you the essentials of a contingent contract. Then under that we saw we have two types, absolute contract and contingent contract under the contract. Then I explained to you what are the rules which will be applicable by the enforcement of law for this contingent contracts. Thank you students.